Salutations, pups, and welcome to Chapter 13 of The One They Call Broccoli by Texiliaz. As always, a link to the fic will be in the description below. And with that out of the way, let's get on into it. Chapter 13, Therapy with Hound Dog. Summary. Exactly like the chapter title says, now being an official UA student, it is finally time for Izuku's first therapy appointment. Just what kind of secrets might get revealed, and what will his headmates think about all of this? Author's notes. Hello, everyone. So, heads up, this is a kind of heavy chapter where we'll learn more about Izuku's childhood and Inko's treatment of our boy, as well as describing forceful switching between alters. It might be triggering, so please read the warnings before proceeding. Please also note that what I call forceful switching is those times a switch can feel sudden or painful, but switching between alters is not always like that, and most of the time, switches happen without anyone even noticing it. Also, I am not a therapist and is only speaking from my own personal experiences. Trigger warning. Description of emotional child abuse and neglect. Mentions of starvation, dissociation, forceful/painful switching from DID, panic attacks. Please let me know if I forgot something. Anyway, hope you enjoy this chapter. The same day, after school. Izuku's point of view. Izuku hesitantly stepped into the small office, staying close to Nezu's side. The office was small and cozy, one half looking like any other office with the obligatory desk and bookcases, both decorated with framed photos and potted plants. On the other side of the room stood a dark blue armchair and a matching couch facing each other. There was also a small coffee table in between, covered in what looked like a bunch of different fidget toys and pamphlets, and also packets of tissues. Lots and lots of tissues. Izuku's attention got dragged away from looking around the room when Nezu cleared his throat and started speaking. Good afternoon, Hound Dog. Here's Midoriya Izuku that I've been telling you about. Midoriya, say hello to Hound Dog, our school's very own therapist. Nezu introduced them cheerfully. Hello, Hound Dog. I'm a big fan. Thank you for having me, Izuku squeaked out, giving a deep bow. Hound Dog barked out a laugh, making Izuku, despite his best efforts, flinch. It took everything in him not to hiss and bolt out of the room. What can he say? Living as a small cat has made him a bit wary of dogs. No need to be so formal, Midoriya. Please come sit down, the hero said, gesturing to the couch while he himself sat down on the armchair. And don't worry, I've heard all about your situation from Nezu already, both regarding your quirks as well as your living situation. Izuku shot Nezu a betrayed look while he sat down. But the mammal simply stood there and smiled at him, shrugging his shoulders casually. It felt necessary for Hound Dog to know about everything, so he would be able to help you and your headmates better. I assure all of you that Hound Dog is trustworthy, his mentor told them. And even though Izuku trusted Nezu and could see his point, he still didn't feel completely okay with him telling someone else about his secrets. And neither were the vestiges. Hound Dog cleared his throat, gaining Izuku's attention. No need to worry, Midoriya. I understand the gravity of your quirks being kept a secret, and I assure you, as a licensed therapist, I will keep everything said within these walls to myself. Izuku gave him a small, hesitant nod. Well, I guess this is where I should leave you two alone, Nezu said, patting Izuku's knee before turning around and walking back towards the door. Before he left, he gave Izuku one last encouraging smile. You are all safe here, Midoriya. I promise. And with that, Nezu left the room, leaving Izuku, and the vestiges, alone with Hound Dog. As soon as Nezu closed the door, Izuku felt the vestiges stir inside of him, restlessly moving closer to the front of his mind. I don't trust this guy, Third muttered. Oh, come on. He seems nice, Nana answered. I agree with third. I also don't like how Nezu told him our secret. We don't know anything about this hero, the second huffed, shuffling around in Izuku's mind in irritation. What is happening inside of you right now? Hound Dog asked gently, leaning forward in his seat and watching Izuku with curious eyes. Izuku blinked in surprise. He hadn't even noticed that he had zoned out. Oh, just a lot of talking, he answered, rubbing the back of his neck sheepishly and avoiding the hero's intense gaze. From the vestiges? Izuku froze before he remembered that Hound Dog knew, and then he nodded, keeping his head low, gaze locked onto the carpeted floor. Hound Dog hummed and leaned back. And what is it like when they talk? Can you hear their words or feel their feelings? There was a sound of a pen clicking, and Izuku noticed in the corner of his eyes how Hound Dog had brought out a notepad. Izuku took a deep, shaking breath, trying to gather his thoughts and distinguish them from the other 7 people currently talking inside his mind. It's kind of like, I can sometimes hear their voices, but mostly it's just a constant static, with a few sentences leaking through. And, I can feel their emotions pretty well too, I guess. More so than actual words. Izuku paused thoughtfully, frowning down at the floor. It's also kind of like something is pulling at my brain. Like, parts of my brain are moving around. It's it's kind of making me dizzy, to be honest, he admitted. The vestiges froze at that, letting out gasps of surprise. Wait, what? We didn't know that! Why didn't you tell us, kiddo? Izuku shook his head with a frown. Wouldn't matter, not your fault, he muttered softly, ducking his head further. I don't mind if you want to speak with them in front of me, Hound Dog told him gently. Izuku's head shot up at that, not realizing that the man had heard him. Okay, he answered uncertainly, fidgeting a little with his hands. His gaze traveled to some of the fidget toys on the table, and his fingers twitched, but he didn't want to be a bother and ask if he could try them. So, what were the vestiges talking about when Nezu left? You looked a bit upset, Hound Dog asked curiously, bringing Izuku's attention back to him. There was a disagreement? Izuku said carefully, hunching his shoulders and biting his lip. Hound Dog hummed, jotting something down on the notepad. About? He hummed, looking back up at Izuku. They, don't all trust you, he said awkwardly, avoiding the man's eyes and pulling at his fingers as he fidgeted some more. Well, that is not surprising, Hound Dog said, making Izuku look up at him in surprise. We just met, after all, and you all just learned that Nezu shared your secret with someone you didn't know. It is understandable for them to trust me, for them to not to trust me, and even be upset. Izuku shifted uncomfortably in his seat. You're not mad? He asked, glancing between Hound Dog and the door, his whole body tense. Hound Dog smiled at him, looking just a tad bit terrifying with all his sharp teeth, and yet, somehow, still kind. I assure you, Midoriya, that nothing you or the vestiges can do around me would make me mad at you. I'm here to listen and to help, not to get mad, Hound Dog told him patiently. Izuku felt his head spin. This was Hound Dog, a hero that was known for having a temper, and here he was, being so patient and calm. How about we get to know one another better? I must admit that I am very curious about your headmates, but I am also curious about you, Midoriya. Or do you prefer being called Izuku, or even Broccoli? Izuku, he was quick to say. I don't like the name Midoriya, and, Broccoli is the cat's name, not mine, he muttered, looking away with a frown. All right then, Izuku, but that's an interesting wording. May I ask if you see yourself and your cat form as different people? Izuku's frown deepened. Um, I don't know. Kind of? I mean, I know we are the same person, but Broccoli is also just so different. I don't really feel like I'm broccoli while I'm like this, he said, gesturing to himself. And, well, it sometimes feels wrong thinking I'm Izuku while I'm broccoli. Is is that weird? Izuku asked hesitantly, glancing up at the hero. The man just smiled at him. No, not at all, considering your circumstances. But I'd like us to try and figure out just why you might have come to see it as this way. Would you mind telling me how you got to live with All Might and Eraserhead? Izuku shifted uncomfortably. Where to begin? He mumbled. Start from the beginning. What were your biological parents like? Hound Dog helpfully suggested. Izuku bit his lip, hunching further into himself. Will they get in trouble? He asked quietly, glancing up at Hound Dog. No, not unless you want me to take action against them. Without your consent, or unless you are in immediate danger, my snout is shut. That made Izuku smile just a little, and he took a deep breath. He felt the vestiges growing quiet and moving closer, probably listening intently. After all, Izuku had never told them about his parents before. Well, I'm an only child. My mom, Inko, is a nurse, and my dad, Hizashi, was a businessman, last I heard of him. He left some time after my quirk failed to appear. I don't really have many memories about him, since he was rarely home after I turned 4, but remember he used to hum lullabies whenever I couldn't sleep or I was sad. He also used to sneak me snacks whenever Mom wasn't looking, Izuku said, a small smile tugging at his lips despite the sad memories surrounding the man leaving. And your mom? Izuku's smile fell, and he grimaced. Inko used to be nice. I would say it all took a turn after Hisashi stopped coming home. After he left, she, kinda started blaming me for that. Sometimes, during the nights, she would drag me out of bed and sit me down by the kitchen table, saying we need to discuss everything I had done wrong, which, to sum it up, was basically just existing. He felt the vestiges growing mad inside his mind, hot anger almost consuming him, and so he was quick to continue. She would never yell at me or hurt me. She would just go on these hour-long rants about how awful and ungrateful I was, and how Dad left because of me, and stuff like that. He then felt himself growing colder, the memory of sitting in that kitchen still feeling fresh in his mind. The soft cushion of the couch did nothing to ease the memory of the hard wooden chair he had to stay seated on for those late hours. If if I tried to talk back or start crying, she would tell me how I needed to stop getting so worked up over a simple discussion. I still have a hard time dealing with that word. It's like as soon as someone says they need to discuss something, I just freeze. Hound Dog nodded and hummed in sympathy. That's understandable, he said softly, lowering his notebook and giving Izuku his full attention. I hope you understand that those were not discussions. That was emotional abuse, and from the sounds of it, it has become a trauma for you. At the word abuse, Izuku jerked back in his seat. Isn't that a bit extreme to call it that? She was just talking. It wasn't like she yelled or hit me or anything. And those discussions only really happened in the early years. They kind of got less and less common after I stopped coming home that much. By then, she was mostly just ignoring me, he said, his voice growing more and more quiet towards the end, suddenly not so sure what to think. Hound Dog sighed and shook his head sadly. Izuku, I want you to please listen when I say that what you are describing is clear emotional abuse, as well as what sounds like neglect. Izuku gripped his arms tightly, hugging himself. I guess the neglect part I had already suspected, he mumbled. But even that wasn't really that bad, he was then quick to add, shaking his head frantically. Really, she was just ignoring me. Can you describe some of the things she did when she was ignoring you? Um, just, Not talking to me while we were home, or waking me up in the morning, stuff like that. In elementary school, I would often wake up and she had already left to go to work, but after I learned how to set an alarm, it stopped being a problem, he said, shrugging as he looked away uncomfortably. Then he frowned again, remembering something. I guess it was a problem. Since I wasn't really allowed to eat without permission, I tried at first making some things, just a bowl of cereal or a sandwich in the mornings, but she would mark everything in the kitchen and notice if I ate, and then she would get mad, so I usually had to go hungry to school. At least our elementary school gave us free lunches, so I had one meal a day. Only one? What about dinner? Izuku shrugged again, keeping his head low. Same as with breakfast. Inka marked everything so I wouldn't be able to steal it. I just go to bed hungry. Kid, that is seriously messed up. Izuku flinched at the loud volume of Nana's voice echoing in his head. What? It's not that bad, he defended quickly, feeling a bit dizzy. Sure, it got a bit bad after I entered middle school, since they didn't offer us any lunches, but then I started getting sneaky, he said, smiling at the memory. You see, I started to copy her marks and switched hers with mine, Izuku explained, mimicking the way you would hold a pencil and start drawing some lines in the air. That way, I could sometimes eat small meals in the morning, and even before she got home from work. She never even noticed since I made sure never to take too much, he said, grinning proudly. He had felt so smart once he figured out he could do that, after all. And then, soon after that, I met my dads, Shota and Toshi, who were feeding me every morning and evening and were super kind, and then I started living with them, Izuku told him, his cheeks hurting from smiling so much and his feet kicking a little underneath him. I even found a secret hideout to store all of my things at, so they wouldn't even notice I was there. Oh, but don't ask me where it is, because it is a secret, he told Hound Dog sternly, looking at the hero with a pout. Of course, I won't ask you to expose your secret hideout, Hound Dog reassured him. Izuku nodded approvingly. Good. Wait, where was I? He said, tilting his head and tapping his finger against his chin. His head felt funny. We were talking about your mother, the hero said helpfully. Oh, right, thanks, Izuku said with a grin. So yeah, I stopped going back to Mom's place a few years back. Toshi and Shota were so much kinder than her anyway, he said with a shrug. He was feeling restless. His legs were kicking back and forth beneath him, and his eyes traveled around the room before they landed on the table. Curiously, he picked up one of the colorful toys. It was a weird-looking cube, and he started playing with it, turning it around in his hands. And as soon as he did, his eyes lit up, and he smiled brightly when he noticed that the cube seemed to fold in, out, and around itself, making a satisfying clicking sound every time it changed shape. He smiled at Hound Dog and showed the magic cube to him. The hero smiled back kindly, and Izuku happily continued to play with the cube. Anything else you want to tell me? Hound Dog asked. Izuku thought for a moment and hummed, the cube folding and clicking in his hands. Oh, there is also Slushy. Did you know about her? She's my big sister, and she is the cutest! Izuku exclaimed excitedly, a huge smile on his face. That sounds nice, Izuku. I am glad you have such a kind family, Hound Dog answered him with a gentle smile, writing a bunch of stuff on his notepad. Izuku hummed happily, his legs kicking back and forth while he leaned back on the couch. His gaze turned briefly from the cube and over to the notepad, wondering why the hero was taking so many notes. His attention was turned back to the moment when Hound Dog spoke again. The hero put down the notepad and laid it in his lap. Forgive me for asking, but something seemed to change in you while you were talking. Can you tell me what happened? Izuku kept his gaze down at his hands, and he tilted his head. Huh? What do you mean? Well, for one, your mood changed quite abruptly, Hound Dog explained, holding up a claw. As well as the tone of your voice and your mannerism, he counted, raising another 2 claws in his raised paw. Oh, Izuku said simply, his hand still playing with the clicking cube. The sound and repetitive movement were somehow calming. What are the vestiges saying right now? The what? Izuku asked, looking at Hound Dog curiously. The vestiges, Izuku. The past user of one-for-alls. Izuku simply frowned at the hero, and his hands twitched, stopping what they were doing. He was starting to feel sick, like he was going to throw up. What? He asked, rubbing a hand to one of his eyes and pressing down, trying to fight back against the dots now clouding his vision. You don't know who they are? Izuku shook his head, trying to remember. His brain started to hurt. It felt heavy and like it was moving inside his skull, like something was pushing him away. The whole room tilted, and Izuku felt so dizzy, like he was about to fall over. He didn't even notice dropping the cube. Ku? Can you tell me what happened? What? Izuku asked, feeling exhausted. The vestiges were talking loudly inside his head, making it hard to think. Sorry, I think I zoned out for a moment. What were you saying? Izuku asked, ashamed that he had apparently zoned out in the middle of a conversation again. He shuffled a bit in place and noticed a weird cube laying next to him on the couch. Curiously, Izuku reached down and picked it up, noticing it folded out and in on itself. Huh, an infinity cube. First time I've seen one of these in person. Izuku thought idly while he started fidgeting with it. The clicking sound was very satisfying. Hound Dog cleared his throat, and Izuku jumped, embarrassingly lowering the cube and looking up at the hero. He was just about to apologize when Hound Dog spoke. Ah, no, please continue. They are there for you and other visitors to use, after all, he said kindly, gesturing to the fidget toy. Izuku nodded hesitantly and ducked his head, turning the cube around in his hands. He carefully started folding it, but made sure to do it quietly and gently. He didn't want the noise to annoy Hound Dog, after all. Do you remember what we were talking about before you zoned out? Hound Dog asked, watching him even more curiously than before. It was honestly making his skin crawl. Izuku frowned and thought for a moment. My dad? I mean, Hisashi? And Inko? He answered, suddenly feeling uncertain for some reason. Do you remember mentioning Toshi and Shota? No, he answered honestly, shaking his head. What about drawing marks on the food packaging at your mom's place? What? I never did that, Izuku answered, reeling back at the mere suggestion of doing such a thing. I would just go hungry, he explained. I see, Hound Dog sighed. And what about the vestiges? Do they remember anything? Izuku blinked in confusion at that weird question. Why would the vestiges know anything about Inko? He thought, focusing in on the vestiges and finally listening to their frantic chatter. Izuku? What happened? Yeah, what was that? What was what? Izuku asked back quietly, utterly confused. You started acting really weird and even asked who we were. Kiddo, you didn't remember us at all. Izuku frowned and shook his head. That couldn't be right. Right? What are they saying? Hound Dog asked him. You're saying I couldn't remember them? Izuku said slowly. Hound Dog raised an eyebrow. And you don't remember saying that? I think I would remember saying that, Izuku huffed, crossing his arms. The hero sighed. And yet you did, and you don't. Izuku felt his mind come to a halt at that, his arms dropping to his side. Wait, what? Izuku, Hound Dog said, voice growing serious. I believe there might be some more to the fact that you don't see yourself and Broccoli as the same person. Have you heard about dissociative identity disorder, otherwise known as DID? No, he said faintly, shaking his head. Hound Dog took a deep breath and leaned forward, folding his paws in front of him. To start off, I want you to understand that to get this diagnosis, we will have to run some tests, and it is a very long process, so this is in no way me giving you a diagnosis right now. But, to put it simply, DID is a disorder that might develop among individuals who have, from a very young age, been severely abused. It's a trauma response and a survival instinct where, when something becomes too much for the young brain to handle, it splits, creating a new part or personality, otherwise known as an alter, that can help and carry the burden. This alter may or may not share memories with the other alters, and how many there are may also vary between systems, that is to say, your brain. Izuku's eyes widened at that. My brain is split in pieces? He thought, starting to panic. But before he could dwell too long on that horrifying thought, Hound Dog continued. To be completely honest, when you first arrived here, and I learned of you and Broccoli, my mind immediately went to DID. But there is also a similar phenomenon that is happening among a lot of abuse individuals with animal transformation quirks. Current theories suggest that it's similar to DID, but there hasn't been enough studies done to prove it, because most people with this condition flee into the wilderness and are never seen again. I'm assuming you sticking around and living in society has to do with the fact that Shota was luckily right there and he felt safe for you to stay with. Hound Dog took a deep breath and looked at Izuku sadly. But considering what I just witnessed, how abruptly your personality and even memory changed, without you even changing your physical form, he trailed off, seemingly choosing his words carefully. I guess what I'm trying to say is, you having already developed DID before you even got your quirk might be a strong possibility, which could, in fact, make Izuku and Broccoli different alters, though that obviously doesn't have to be the case. Does that make sense? No. That does not make sense. None of that makes any sense, Izuku thought. His head was literally spinning. Wait, hold up. Just what? Then am I not real? Izuku blurted out, his panic threatening to consume him. How many? I mean, if that's what I have, then how many people are inside my head? Wasn't 7 enough already? Now you're telling me there might be more? Izuku, it's okay. Deep breaths. Here, follow my breathing, the hero said gently, guiding him through his breathing and grounding him. Sorry, Izuku whispered shakingly, drying off some tears that had started to fall. It's okay. I understand that it is a lot to take in, but like I said, this is all just a theory so far, so we need to actually do the tests before I can give you a proper diagnosis. Same thing with some other diagnosis. There's more? Izuku said faintly, leaning back into the couch and feeling all of his energy getting sucked out of him. Unfortunately, yes. We will do a standard test which covers the most common mental health diagnosis, and then we'll make a more in-depth test for each one. But just from this short meeting, I would say it is quite clear already that you probably have PTSD, anxiety. More than that, I don't want to say. Izuku hunched into himself. Oh, was all he said. Hound Dog tilted his head and watched him curiously. What are you thinking? Just, it's a lot to take in, I guess. Sometimes I would get anxious or panicked, and other times I would black out and it would go a few minutes or hours or even days, but I thought that was normal? Izuku said, shrugging and picking at his school uniform. I'm afraid that is not normal, but then again, I am a giant dog, which also isn't normal, Hound Dog answered with a smile. Izuku's lips tugged into an almost smile at that. So, if I were you, I wouldn't focus so much on what is normal, and instead focus on what we can do to make you feel better. Okay. What do you say we end it here for today, and we can move on to the tests next week? I'm thinking we should probably start with 1 session per week, so we don't overwhelm you. I also have some pamphlets about DID and trauma here if you want to read at home. Izuku accepted the pamphlets with a shaky smile. Thanks, but I think I will read it somewhere else. It would look a bit weird if Broccoli started reading these at home, he chuckled. Hound Dog smiled at him. Take care of yourself. All of you. And don't hesitate reaching out if you need anything or anyone to talk to. My door is always open. Thanks, Hound Dog. And, we will. Are you alright? Nana asked him, floating next to him. They were slowly making their way over to the park so they could leave his stuff at his hideout before going home. The pamphlets he had gotten from Hound Dog were safely stored inside his bag. Yeah, just thinking. It was a lot to take in, he whispered. Nana hummed in agreement next to him, flickering in and out of view in the evening light. Did any of you know? Have I acted weird sometimes? He asked quietly, biting his lip as he kept his gaze firmly on the ground. To his embarrassment, that caused the vestiges to laugh, Nana losing her form completely from laughing too hard. Kiddo, the real question is when you aren't acting weird, Diagora chuckled teasingly. You know what I mean, Izuku whined, burying his face in his hands. We know, Yuichi said gently. And no, not really. At least, not like you did back there. What do you mean by that? They seemed to be hesitating about something, and for a moment all Izuku could hear was static as he waited for them to answer. And then Nana spoke softly, her voice echoing in his mind. Well, sometimes your mood and mannerism would change quite drastically, especially when you go from human to cat form, or if something upsets you or makes you excited. But you're also a teenager, so that's not uncommon. But I guess how abrupt it would change is a bit extreme, even for teenagers. So it does make sense what Hound Dog explained, she said softly, a hint of a smile in her voice. It would certainly explain a lot, Diagoro said, earning sounds of agreement from the others. Great. So I'm crazy, Izuku muttered, kicking a pebble at the ground while he walked. No, you're not, Izuku cut in suddenly. You heard what Hound Dog said, and you skimmed through those pamphlets. You're not crazy. You are hurt. Very, very hurt, and your brain found a creative way to deal with that. I just can't stop thinking about how I forgot you guys. I feel bad, he said, ducking his head. Hey, it's okay, Yoichi reassured him. We're still here, and we don't blame you. Yeah, and even if you forget some things, it seems like we can still remember you and keep you up to date when you get back, Diagoro said confidently. Yeah, kiddo. Don't think you're getting rid of us anytime soon, Nana chuckled, giving Izuku what he could only assume was the mental version of a hug. Izuku smiled, tears gathering in his eyes. Thanks, guys. You're the best. That night, Broccoli had a hard time settling down and falling asleep. So much had happened today, with him starting at UA, meeting the class, going over their quirks with Nezu, and then meeting Hound Dog. It really wasn't that weird that he couldn't settle down, his mind spinning. And after changing positions for the millionth time and Slushy huffing at him in annoyance, giving him a buff with her head, Broccoli gave up and jumped down from the climbing tree. Then, he quietly walked around the apartment, looking at everything around him. Everything was so high up from down here, and he jumped up onto the kitchen counter to watch the dark and quiet room. Outside the kitchen window, the sky was dark, with only a few stars and the crescent moon visible from here. The sun would rise in a few hours, and then the whole building would start bustling with life as people got ready for the day, him and his dads included. Broccoli looked down at the counter he was sitting on, remembering the time Toshi started making him bentos. The man hadn't even known who he was by then, and he still technically didn't. They had just recently met by then, and yet his dad decided to go out of his way for Izuku. He wondered if Toshi would have done that for the other kids too. He wondered if Toshi would have done that for other kids too, if he had chosen another successor. Probably. That's just how his dad was. Broccoli then glanced at the various containers of dry foods lined up behind him, remembering those damn marks that Inca would leave back at his old home. But he couldn't remember ever messing with them. He would never be brave or dumb enough to try and change them behind Inca's back. And yet, the vestiges and Hound Dog told him that he had said he did. Broccoli let out a tired huff and laid down on the counter, tucking his paws underneath his chin. I wonder what my parents are doing right now. Broccoli? Broccoli's ears twitched, and he turned his head to see Toshi standing in the doorway, rubbing his eye groggily and wearing one of his yellow pajamas covered with cartoon bunnies. What are you doing on the counter? You know Sho will flip if he sees you up here, he scolded tiredly. But despite his words, the tone was soft and fond, causing Broccoli to relax. His dad petted him on the head, and when he walked past him to get a glass of water, Broccoli purred at the contact and chased after the touch. Couldn't sleep, huh? Toshi asked, leaning against the counter next to him. Broccoli didn't answer and just laid back down, staring out the dark window at the other side of the room. Toshi chuckled. Yeah, me neither. His dad then considered one of the containers behind Broccoli, before he reached out and grabbed one of them. Don't tell Shota, he said with an amused smile, pulling out a few cat treats and laying them in front of Broccoli. Broccoli perked up and eagerly ate the treats, purring loudly. This is why Toshi was secretly Broccoli's favorite. At least when it came to food. Too soon, he had finished eating and he laid back down, closer to Toshi, purring contently. They stood/laid in silence after that, the only sound being that of the clock ticking and Broccoli purring, occasionally accompanied with Toshi sipping at his water. After a while, the man leaned away from the counter and refilled his glass. Alrighty then. Let's head to bed, shall we? His dad said softly. Broccoli tilted his head at him and then let out a confused meow when Toshi scooped him up with one hand and held him close to his chest. What, you think I'd let you sleep on the counter? Toshi murmured, kissing the top of Broccoli's forehead. He then carried him into his dad's bedroom, where Shota was sleeping, probably exhausted after dealing with his new class. Toshi made a shh gesture and laid them both down, laying Broccoli so he was resting on top of Toshi's chest, and then scratched him behind his ear with a smile. Immediately, Broccoli let out a bone-rumbling purr while he nuzzled closer to Toshi, settling down on his sternum and purring loudly. The man chuckled softly and kept petting him. Good night, Broccoli. Night, Dads. Author's notes. Story time! So those late-night discussions and putting marks on food things? Yeah, those are some of the things our a-hole of a dad used to do. But you want to know something crazy that happened while I was writing this chapter? Izuku wasn't actually going to switch in the middle of that food story. But while writing about it, we switched IRL, and the next time I felt myself back in control, I scrolled back and someone had written that whole thing about changing the marks, and I was like, what the fuck? Where did that come from? I never did that. So I told my mom about this. Please don't hate my mom. She is wonderful and didn't know about the abuse since they got divorced before things got that bad. Anyway, I kind of asked her, Hey mom, remember how me and my bro told you about those marks Dad used to put on the food at home? Mom, yes, what about them? Proceeds to tell her about what happened while I wrote this scene. Mom, wait, didn't your brother once get in trouble for changing those marks? Me, and then I remembered, one time Dad noticed someone had changed the mark and he blew up on my older brother who tearfully denied ever touching them, and is still denying doing such a thing to this day. Me, did I change the marks and my brother got the blame? Mom, did you? Me, I don't know! Mom, me, I gotta call him and apologize! So yeah, that's the story of how I, 15 years later, called my brother and apologized profusely, and he was like, what the fuck is going on? Why are you apologizing? LOL. Long story short, DID is weird. Sorry for the long note, but I felt like I had to tell you all this, because while I'm used to switching in the middle of writing, I've never had something like this happen before, and just found it kind of fascinating. Also, I based a lot of what Hound Dog said this chapter after my own therapist. Hopefully she'll never know what Hound Dog looks like, or I bet she won't be as flattered as she was when I told her about this chapter, lol. Important. And again, I am not a therapist. Neither am I speaking for all who have DID. I'm just one system putting my own trauma and experience into this fictional story. I strongly recommend looking up more about DID or OSDD if you are curious to learn more. Next chapter, we'll get some more Bakugo and his dads are growing. Next chapter, we'll get some more Bakugo, and his dads are growing sus. Hope you look forward to it. We'll be taking a short break from AO3 over the weekend since it's the first day of May. But we'll be back after the holiday. Gotta love the day we Swedes welcome spring with a huge bonfire, lol. Anyway, take care, everyone. And that is it for chapter 13. That was a long author's note, but I appreciate it. I again want to remind everyone that I do not have DID. So everything that was in that author's notes, that's from the author. The author has DID. I don't. I just wanted to make that clear because I wanted to make it clear that I don't know what DID is like. And so, sorry if my portrayal with my voice acting was not good. I've had friends who had DID, but I don't know what it's like to have DID. And so, hopefully, my voice acting was okay for that. That said, I hope that you enjoyed this chapter. It was a bit of a heavy one, but I think it was extremely well written, and so I'm gonna give props to Texiliaz. Texiliaz, you are an amazing author, and you all should show Texiliaz some love too. Go to the link in the description and comment on the fic. With that out of the way, please leave me comments because it makes me super happy to hear them, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye bye, pups!